We are told to write the equation of the polynomial function with the given zeros. That means with the given solutions for x. Okay, so with number 1, it tells me that x is equal to 3 and x is equal to negative 4. Everybody ready? We're going to work backwards. So the very first thing I want you to do is write two separate equations. X equals 3 and x equals negative 4. Okay, that's the very first thing we're going to do is set them equal to x. Okay. Then what we need to do is we need to get them equal to 0. We want to have x plus or minus something equals 0. So how would I move that 3 over with the x? What would I do to it? I would subtract it. So it becomes x minus 3 equals 0. Then how would I move the 4 over? Add it. And so that's going to become x plus 4 equals 0. Okay, basically I'm going here and I'm working my way backwards. Bless you. Is everybody good so far? All right, then what I do is I take everything that I have set equal to 0 and I put them next to each other to multiply. And in this case, they're binomials, so I'm going to put them in parentheses. So I'm going to take that x minus 3 in parentheses, and I'm going to put it next to the x plus 4 in parentheses. And then I'm going to stick that equals 0 on the back of it. Do not forget the equals 0, otherwise you do not have an equation, you have an expression. The directions ask for an equation, so you need to make sure that you write it as an equation. And then to make this look nice and neat and to be a full polynomial, what do you think I need to do with those now? Multiply. So FOIL them out. Multiply everything out. Combine your like terms. You will have a polynomial in the end. You need to make sure it is set equal to 0. That gives you your polynomial equation. How many x values did they give us, or how many answers did they give us? 2. So when I finish, the highest degree on my polynomial should be an x squared. Okay, if I don't get an x squared, that means I did something wrong. All right, so we're going to again distribute. X times x is x squared. X times positive 4 is a positive 4x. Negative 3 times x is a negative 3x. And negative 3 times positive 4 is a negative 12. Again, don't forget your equal 0. And then we can just combine our terms. I don't have an x squared. I have a positive 4x and a negative 3x, which is going to give me a positive 1x. Then minus 12 equals 0. And that is what my final answer looks like. That's the polynomial equation that has an x value of 3 and an x value of negative 4. Okay, so we're basically going backwards from where we started yesterday. Make a little bit of sense? All right, go ahead and start setting up number 2. We have how many answers this time? 3. So when I finish, I should have an x cubed. You can, but we can also just leave it 0. Either way would be okay with me. We're setting each one of these equal to 0. I mean, not equal to 0, equal to x first. My bad. I said the wrong thing. And then what I need to do is I need to make each one of those equations equal to 0. On that first one, do I need to add or subtract the 0 over? No, it's already equal to 0, so I'm just going to go ahead and bring that down. How would I move the 5 over? Subtract. So it becomes x minus 5 equals 0. And then the 7, how do I move that one over? So that becomes x plus 7 equals 0. Now, when I set this one up, this is just x. Anytime you have an x, or if you have multiple x's that equal 0, you'll be like x squared if you had 2 of them, x to the 3rd if you had 3. We're going to put that in the front of the parentheses, and then we'll put our binomials in parentheses next to each other. Can you multiply 3 things at once? No, you can only do 2 at a time. My recommendation is to do the binomials first. Leave that x on the outside until you've multiplied the binomials together. Then once you do that, then you can distribute that x. So go ahead and finish it. Multiply out the x minus 5 and the x plus 7. Combine those like terms. And then once you do that, then you can distribute that x that is on the outside to everything inside. That's basically just a lot of multiplying and combining like terms here. All right, again, I leave that x excuse me, on the outside, and then I'm going to distribute the 2 binomials, foiling them, whatever you want to call it, distribute, foil, same process. And then if I combine those like terms inside, I get x squared plus 2x minus 35. Is everybody good with that? And then the last thing I want to do is then take that x that's on the outside and multiply it by everything on the inside. So I get x to the 3rd plus 2x squared minus 35x. And do not forget your equal 0. If you want to put it equal to y or equal to f of x, that is fine, but equal to 0 is also fine. It just says write an equation. The only requirement is I have to have an equal sign there. Is everybody okay? Okay, the next one's a little longer, but I want you to try it. Everybody ready? Okay, so we're going to set each one equal to x first. That's a -4, not a +4, so be careful when you're copying your numbers down. Now, the x equals 0 is going to stay. That x equals 1 is going to turn into x minus 1. So I get these 3 binomials. So I'm going to take x times x minus 1 times x minus 3 times x plus 4, and I'm going to go ahead and stick that equals 0 so I don't forget it and lose a point. You can only multiply 2 of these at a time. I leave that x until the very end. I'm going to multiply these 2 first. Okay, that x is going to stay out. X times x is x squared. X times -3 is -3x. -1 times x is -x. And -1 times -3 is a +3. Bring down that x plus 4. Now, I personally would combine my terms on that one before I start trying to multiply again. So that's x squared minus 4x plus 3. All right, now I've got to multiply again. I'm leaving that x alone for right now. I'm going to multiply these 2 together. And again, that is just the distributing process. X squared times x is x to the 3rd. X squared times +4 is a +4x squared. Then I do -4x times x, which is a -4x squared. -4x times 4 is a -16x. And then I still have that 3 that has to be multiplied, so that's going to be plus 3x plus 12. And then before I distribute that x, I am going to combine my terms inside my parentheses. There's only one x to the third. What happens to these 4x squareds? They cancel. Then I have a negative 16x and a positive 3x, which is going to give me negative 13x. And then I have that plus 12 that comes down. And now that I have multiplied all of my binomials together, I can then distribute that x to get my final polynomial. X times x to the third is x to the fourth. X times 13x is a negative 13x squared. And x times 12 is 12x. And then again, don't forget your equals 0. So we've got x to the fourth minus 13x squared plus 12x equals 0. Too much? Go ahead. Are you ready? Here we go. We're going to have to go through this one together. Huh? Why? Gotta learn how to deal with fractions. All right. What's the first step? We set everything equal to x. Okay, so let's do that. Make sure you pay close attention to your signs, because if you write if you forget a sign, you're going to mess up your whole problem. Okay, so just double check before you get started with your work. Now, when we write these polynomial equations, we do not use fractions as our coefficients. This means I need to get rid of my fractions from the get-go. So in the process of making each one of these equal to 0, I want to get rid of my fraction. So let's start with the first one. If x equals negative 3/4, how can I get rid of that denominator 4? We're going to multiply both sides by 4. Okay. Now what that does is that cancels the fraction out. And so now I'm left with 4x equals negative 3. But I'm not finished. It's not equal to 0 yet. What would I do next? Add the 3. Yep. So it's going to look like this. It's going to be 4x plus 3 equals 0. That make a little bit of sense? Okay, so that's all we're going to do for each one of them. What would I multiply by for the second one? Okay, so we're going to multiply both sides by 3. Those 3's cancel. That leaves me with 3x equals negative 1. How do I get that equal to 0? Plus 1. So that's going to be 3x plus 1 equals 0. All right, and then the last fraction, how do I get rid of the 2? Multiply by 2. So that's going to give me 2x equals 1. How do I move the 1 over? So that's going to give me 2x minus 1 equals 0. And then luckily that last one is just 0, so I don't really have to worry about that, right? Not as bad as you thought it was, right? Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to set each one of those in parentheses. The one that's just equal to 0, where does that going to go? In the front. And then I'm going to do 4x plus 3 times the next one, 3x plus 1, and times the next one, 2x minus 1. I want you to take some time. This is now just like the question we did before, except for you're going to end up with some bigger numbers because you got bigger numbers to multiply. All right, I'm going to start with the first 2. Keeping that x out front, combining my terms. So at this point, I have x times 12x squared plus 13x plus 3, and then times 2x minus 1. I'm not finished. I don't know. It's a little aggravating. Did you find it, Nia? Keep the x out front, and then we're going to distribute again. 12x squared times 2x is 24x to the third. 12x squared times negative 1 is a negative 12x squared. 13x times 2x is a positive 26x squared. 13x times negative 1 is a negative 13x. But I still have that 3, so 3 times 2x is a positive 6x. And 3 times negative 1 is negative 3. The negative what? That was from the beginning. That was from multiplying the 12x squared times that negative 1.
You just did it.
Yeah, I hadn't combined them yet. All right, I'm going to leave the x out in the front. I'm going to combine my terms. This is 24x to the third. I have a negative 12x squared and a positive 26x squared, which is going to give me a positive 14x squared. Then I have a negative 13x and a positive 6x, which gives me a negative 7x. And then I have that negative 3. But I'm not quite finished because I still have the x that needs to go to everything inside, which is just going to up the degree for them. That's going to become 24x to the fourth plus 14x to the third minus 7x squared minus 3x, and then don't forget your equals 0. Okay? Everybody okay with that? We have one more. Are we ready? No, no more fractions. So I wrote this one a little differently. Each other question has just been a list of answers. Here I'm using my multiplicity. So my suggestion would be this. Write each answer as many times as it occurs first. Just make your list. So 0 happens how many times? Twice. So I'm going to write 0 twice. And then 5 happens 3 times. So I'm going to write it 3 times. Okay. Well, and then you keep going. Yeah. Okay, so the only difference is instead of just making a list, I wrote them in multiplicity. So you're going to want to write them how many times they occur. And then we're going to have to multiply it out. And one thing I want to show you is I have some people today that have gotten that binomial of x minus 5, and they write it like this. That is not wrong, except for we need to multiply it out. I can't multiply it out when it's like this. Okay, so I actually need to write it 3 times and then start the multiplying process. Okay, that is correct. That's going to happen 3 times, but in order for me to multiply, I need to write it out 3 times. So I'm going to let you work on it. I'm just going to go ahead and get it set up. And this one you will get 125 as your largest number here. Before I start though, if I have x twice, what is going to be in front of my parentheses? X squared. Okay. I'm not going to finish it yet. I'm going to give you some time to work on it. I'm just getting it set up. X squared out front. I'm going to multiply these two together first. That's x squared minus 5x minus 5x plus 25. And if I were you, I would combine my terms first. Otherwise, you get this really long list of terms and it just starts to get real confusing. Okay, so before I multiply that other parts, I'm going to work inside here. And I'm going to add that negative 5 and negative 5 to give me a negative 10. And then I can start working on multiplying these two. Again, we're going to leave that x squared out front. X squared times x is x to the third. X squared times negative 5 is a negative 5x squared. Negative 10x times x is a negative 10x squared. Negative 10x times negative 5 is a positive 50x. And then a positive 25 times x is a positive 25x. And 25 times negative 5 is negative 125. And then again, I'm going to combine my terms so that I don't get real confused. I've got a negative 5x squared and a negative 10x squared, which is going to give me a negative 15x squared. I've got a positive 50 and a positive 25x to give me a positive 75x. And then minus 125. Don't forget the equal 0. And now I'm going to distribute x squared times x to the third is x to the fifth. X squared times negative 15x squared is a negative 15x to the fourth. That's going to be a plus 75x to the third. And then a minus 125, maybe, x squared, and equals 0. Okay, so just be real careful when you go through with those, making